Have you ever imagined turning pain and humiliation into a story of triumph that inspires the world? Today, you'll meet Clara, a young woman expelled from school for being poor, who fought her way back to become the owner of that very institution. Get ready for a journey filled with challenges, twists, and powerful life lessons that will move you and make you reflect. Stay until the end. This story will change the way you see obstacles. It was a day Clara would never forget, a moment etched in her memory like a scar. Standing in front of the entire school, she felt the weight of judgment pressing down on her shoulders. The principal's voice boomed, announcing her expulsion for unpaid tuition, as if her poverty were a crime. The whispers among her classmates stung more than words. They were daggers of shame. Life has a way of testing us when we're at our most vulnerable, doesn't it? But here's the thing. Humiliation might bruise you, but it doesn't define you. It's what you do after that counts. As Clara walked out of those school gates, head held high despite the tears streaming down her face, she realized something profound. Life doesn't wait for you to catch up. The world can be cruel, sure, but it also has a funny way of giving you the tools to fight back if you're willing to look for them. Think about it. How many times have we seen people rise from their lowest points? Oprah was fired from her first job, yet she became a global icon. Clara didn't know it yet, but this moment wasn't her end. It was her beginning. The principal may have thought he was closing a door, but what he didn't realize was that Clara was already searching for windows to climb through. You see, life's rejections often come disguised as redirections. She didn't have money, but she had grit, and grit is worth more than gold in a world that underestimates the determined. As she walked home that day, Clara wasn't just leaving behind a school. She was stepping into a new chapter of her life, where she would write her own rules. Life after expulsion was anything but easy. Clara found herself thrust into a world that didn't care about her dreams or potential. It only cared about survival. She picked up odd jobs, cleaning houses, running errands, and even selling homemade snacks, just to make ends meet. Every coin she earned felt like a small victory, but the weight of responsibility was heavy. Isn't it strange how life forces us to grow up faster when we're dealt a tough hand? Clara wasn't just working for herself. She was keeping her family afloat. And in that struggle, she discovered a strength she never knew she had. But let's be real, there were nights when Clara felt like giving up. The exhaustion from long hours and the sting of lost opportunities often left her questioning if life would ever get better. Yet, in those quiet moments of despair, she found something remarkable: hope. It wasn't loud or flashy. It was a quiet whisper reminding her that storms don't last forever. Think about it. How many times have you faced challenges that seemed impossible, only to look back later and realize they shaped you into someone stronger? Clara's struggles were her crucible, refining her into something unbreakable. Still, the world wasn't kind to a young girl with big dreams and empty pockets. People underestimated her, dismissed her as just another statistic. But Clara, she refused to let their opinions define her worth. She kept her head down and worked hard, knowing that every small step forward was one step closer to something greater. Sometimes life doesn't give you a map. It just gives you a direction and says, figure it out. And that's exactly what Clara did. She figured it out, one day at a time, planting seeds for a future she couldn't yet see. When the world shuts its doors, sometimes you have to build your own. Clara didn't have access to classrooms or textbooks anymore, but she wasn't about to let that stop her. Armed with nothing but an old library card and an insatiable curiosity, she began teaching herself everything she could. Math, business, technology. She devoured it, all like a starving artist chasing inspiration. Isn't it amazing how resourceful we can be when we're determined? Clara's hunger for knowledge wasn't just about survival. It was about proving to herself that she was capable of more. Of course, the journey wasn't glamorous. Clara's classroom was often the corner of a dimly lit room after a long day of work. Her teachers, the pages of worn-out books, and online tutorials she accessed on borrowed devices. But here's the thing. Resilience isn't about having ideal conditions. It's about making the best of what you've got. Look at people like Maya Angelou or Elon Musk, self-taught in many ways. They turned their passions into legacies. Clara was no different. She was building the foundation for something extraordinary, brick by brick. And then came the breakthrough. Clara's relentless pursuit of knowledge sparked an idea, a small business selling handmade tech accessories she had learned to create through her self-education. It started as a side hustle but quickly grew into something bigger than she'd imagined. Isn't it funny how life rewards persistence in the most unexpected ways? What began as a way to make ends meet became her first step toward independence. Clara wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving, proving that even when life takes everything from you, it can never take your will to rise. Clara's little business was no longer just a side hustle. It was blossoming into something remarkable. Orders started pouring in, and before she knew it, she had a loyal customer base. But success didn't come without its challenges. Clara had to learn on the fly how to manage finances, handle marketing, and even negotiate with suppliers. It was like building a plane while flying it, but isn't that how most success stories begin? The truth is, growth often feels chaotic, but it's in that chaos that we discover our true potential. As her business grew, so did Clara's confidence. She wasn't just selling products anymore. She was building a brand one that reflected her grit and determination. People began to notice her work ethic and ingenuity, and soon she found herself networking with industry leaders. It's funny how life works, isn't it? The same girl who was once humiliated in front of her classmates was now being celebrated for her brilliance. Clara's story reminds us that where you start doesn't dictate where you'll end up. It's the journey and the choices you make along the way that shape your destiny. But Clara wasn't content with just making money. She wanted to make an impact. She started hiring people from underserved communities, giving them opportunities she wished someone had given her. Her company became more than a business, it became a movement, a symbol of what's possible when determination meets opportunity. And here's the kicker. Clara didn't just change her own life. She was changing the lives of others too. That's the power of resilience. It doesn't just lift you up. It lifts everyone around you. Life has a way of coming full circle, doesn't it? Years after Clara's expulsion, she stumbled upon a piece of news that stopped her in her tracks. The very school that had humiliated her was now on the verge of bankruptcy. It was poetic, almost as if fate had been waiting for this moment. Clara couldn't help but smile at the irony. The school that once deemed her unworthy was now struggling to survive, and she had the means to save it. But this wasn't about revenge. It was about rewriting the narrative. Sometimes life hands you a chance to turn pain into purpose. The decision wasn't easy though. Clara wrestled with memories of that fateful day, the shame, the tears, the feeling of being less than enough. But then she thought about all the other kids who might be walking those same hallways, feeling invisible and powerless. She realized this was bigger than her past. It was about creating a future where no child would have to endure what she did. Isn't that what true growth looks like? Rising above your pain to pave the way for others? Clara knew this was her opportunity to do just that. With a deep breath and a determined heart, Clara made her move. She began negotiations to purchase the school, using her hard-earned success as leverage. It wasn't just a business deal. It was a statement, a declaration that no one's worth should ever be measured by their bank account. And as the paperwork was finalized, Clara couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. This wasn't just about buying a building. It was about reclaiming her story and proving, once and for all, that resilience and kindness can outshine even the darkest moments. The day Clara walked back through the school gates, it felt surreal. The last time she had been there, she was a young girl, humiliated and cast aside. Now she returned not as a student, but as the owner. Life has a funny way of flipping the script, doesn't it? The staff and students watched in awe as she stepped into the building with quiet confidence. But Clara wasn't there to gloat. She was there to transform. Sometimes the best way to heal old wounds is to turn them into something beautiful. As she toured the familiar hallways, memories came rushing back, some painful, some bittersweet. She could still hear the echoes of laughter from her classmates and the sting of the principal's words. But instead of anger, Clara felt a deep sense of purpose. She wasn't just there to own a school. She was there to create a sanctuary for kids like her kids who dared to dream despite their circumstances. Isn't that what leadership is about? Not power or control, but the ability to inspire change and give others what you once needed. Clara gathered the staff and students in the same auditorium where she had once been humiliated. This time, though, her voice carried hope, not shame. She announced her vision for an inclusive institution where no child would be left behind because of their financial situation. The applause was thunderous, but Clara wasn't looking for validation, she was looking for impact. And as she stood on that stage, she realized something profound. Sometimes life doesn't just give you second chances. It gives you the chance to be someone else's first. Clara wasted no time in unveiling her vision for the school. She stood before a room of curious faces, students, teachers, and parents alike, and painted a picture of what this institution could become. Scholarships for low-income students, emotional support programs, mentorship opportunities, and anti-discrimination policies were just the beginning. Clara wasn't just building a school. She was building a safe haven. Isn't it incredible how one person's pain can inspire a ripple of change? Clara knew firsthand what it felt like to be overlooked, and she was determined to make sure no child ever felt that way again. The changes weren't just surface level. They were transformative. Clara introduced programs that celebrated diversity, encouraged empathy, and nurtured talents that might otherwise go unnoticed. She brought in counselors to address emotional well-being and created workshops to teach students about resilience and self-worth. It wasn't just about academics anymore, it was about shaping well-rounded individuals who believed in their potential. Think about it. How often do we focus on grades while ignoring the person behind them? Clara's plan was a reminder that true education touches both the mind and the heart. Of course, not everyone welcomed the changes with open arms. Some staff members resisted, clinging to outdated systems that perpetuated inequality. But Clara wasn't deterred. She knew change was never easy, especially when it challenged comfort zones. Her resolve only grew stronger as she saw the smiles of students who finally felt seen and valued. Isn't that what real progress looks like? It's messy and uncomfortable at times, but it's always worth it when you're fighting for something bigger than yourself. And Clara? She was just getting started. One of Clara's first and most difficult decisions as the school's new owner was addressing the leadership that had once failed her. The principal who had humiliated her all those years ago still held their position. Clara knew this wasn't personal, it was about aligning the school with its new vision. Leadership sets the tone after all, and if the tone is exclusion, how can progress thrive? Isn't it true that sometimes, to build something better, you have to let go of what no longer serves the mission? Clara understood this, even if it wasn't easy. When she called the principal into her office, there was no anger in her voice, only clarity. She explained that their leadership style didn't align with the inclusive and compassionate future she envisioned for the school. The principal tried to defend their actions from the past, but Clara remained firm. "This isn't about revenge," she said calmly. "It's about ensuring no child feels what I felt under your watch." Isn't it powerful when someone rises above bitterness to act with purpose? Clara wasn't there to settle scores. She was there to set standards. The news of the dismissal spread quickly, and reactions were mixed. Some applauded Clara's courage, while others questioned her decision. But Clara didn't waver. She knew that change often ruffles feathers, and that was okay. What mattered was creating an environment where students felt empowered and supported. As she walked out of her office that day, Clara felt a sense of closure, not just for herself, but for every student who had ever been silenced or overlooked. Sometimes leadership requires tough choices, but those choices pave the way for something greater. One afternoon, as Clara walked through the school grounds, she was approached by someone she hadn't seen in years, the janitor who had been there during her time as a student. His face was lined with age, but his eyes carried a familiar warmth. With a hesitant voice, he apologized for not standing up for her all those years ago. "I saw what they did to you," he admitted, "but I was afraid of losing my job. Isn't it true that sometimes silence can feel like betrayal?" Yet, Clara didn't respond with anger. Instead, she smiled softly and said, "We all do what we can with the courage we have at the time." The janitor's words stayed with her. He wasn't just apologizing. He was seeking redemption. Clara saw an opportunity not just to forgive, but to include him in her mission. She invited him to join her team, knowing his experience and perspective could contribute to the school's transformation. Isn't it beautiful how reconciliation can turn old wounds into new beginnings? By extending grace, Clara wasn't just healing herself. She was creating a space where others could grow too. After all, isn't that what leadership is about, lifting others as you rise? From that day forward, the janitor became one of Clara's most loyal allies. He worked tirelessly to ensure the school became a place of kindness and opportunity. His story became a powerful example for the students, a reminder that it's never too late to make things right. And as Clara watched him mentor young children and share his wisdom, she realized something profound. Forgiveness doesn't just free the other person. It frees you too. The past may shape us, but it doesn't have to define us. One morning, as Clara sifted through her usual pile of correspondence, a simple envelope caught her eye. It was unmarked and bore no return address. Inside was a handwritten letter, the words shaky but heartfelt. The writer confessed to being one of her classmates who had mocked her during the assembly all those years ago. They admitted to feeling ashamed of their actions and praised Clara for her strength and success. Isn't it fascinating how time has a way of revealing the weight of our actions? Clara held the letter in her hands, feeling a mix of emotions: sadness for the past, but also hope for how far she had come. The letter wasn't just an apology. It was a mirror reflecting how much Clara had grown. The writer spoke of how her story had inspired them to rethink their own life choices and treat others with more kindness. Clara couldn't help but smile at the irony. The same people who once looked down on her were now looking up to her as a symbol of resilience. Life has a funny way of humbling us, doesn't it? This letter wasn't just about forgiveness. It was about transformation, both hers and theirs. Clara decided not to dwell on who had written it. Instead, she saw it as a reminder of why she was doing what she did. The school wasn't just about education. It was about creating a culture where compassion outweighed judgment, where no child would feel the sting of ridicule like she once had. As she placed the letter in her desk drawer, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Isn't it true that sometimes the most unexpected gestures can remind us why we started in the first place? And Clara? She was just getting started with changing lives. Just as Clara was settling into her role as the school's owner, a storm began brewing. A former investor of the school, someone with deep pockets and an even deeper sense of entitlement, filed a legal challenge against her ownership. They claimed that the sale was invalid and that they had rights to the property. It was a classic case of power trying to intimidate progress. Isn't it often the case that when you start making waves, someone tries to pull you under? But Clara wasn't the same girl who had walked out of those school gates years ago. She was ready to fight. The investor underestimated Clara's resolve. She didn't panic or let fear consume her. Instead, she assembled a team of legal experts and began digging into the school's financial history. Clara knew that bullies often hide behind facades of power, and she was determined to expose whatever lay beneath. Think about it, how many times have we seen people rise above challenges simply because they refused to back down? Clara understood that this wasn't just about her. It was about protecting everything she had built and everyone who depended on her vision. As the legal battle unfolded, Clara's determination only grew stronger. She wasn't just fighting for ownership. She was fighting for justice. The investor's arrogance fueled her resolve, reminding her of all the times people had tried to silence or belittle her. But here's the thing about resilience: it doesn't just endure. It thrives under pressure. Clara knew this wasn't going to be easy, but she also knew that nothing worth having ever is. And as she prepared for the next round of this battle, she couldn't help but feel a familiar fire in her heart, the same fire that had carried her through every challenge before. Clara knew that if she was going to win this legal battle, she needed more than just a good lawyer. She needed the truth. So she turned to Raphael, a journalist known for his sharp instincts and unwavering commitment to uncovering injustice. Together, they began piecing together the school's financial history, digging through old records and following trails that others had ignored. What they found was shocking. The investor who was challenging Clara's ownership had been embezzling funds from the school for years. Isn't it ironic how those who cry foul often have the most to hide? Clara realized this wasn't just about her. It was about exposing a system of greed that had hurt countless students. The deeper they dug, the more damning the evidence became. Raphael uncovered documents showing how the investor had funneled money meant for educational programs into personal accounts. Clara couldn't help but feel a mix of anger and determination. This wasn't just a betrayal of trust, it was a betrayal of every child who had walked through those school doors hoping for a better future. Have you ever noticed how corruption thrives in silence? But Clara wasn't about to stay silent. She knew that bringing this to light could change everything. With Raphael's help, Clara prepared her case. She wasn't just defending her ownership anymore. She was fighting to hold someone accountable for years of wrongdoing. The investor, once so confident in their power, now faced the weight of undeniable evidence. Clara understood that this wasn't just a victory for her, it was a victory for everyone who believed in fairness and justice. And as she prepared to take this fight public, she felt a sense of purpose stronger than ever before. Sometimes battles choose us so we can shine a light where darkness once thrived. Clara knew that the truth had power, but only if it reached the right ears. Armed with the evidence she and Raphael had uncovered, she organized a press conference to expose the investor's corruption. The room was packed with journalists, cameras flashing as Clara stepped up to the podium. She spoke with calm confidence, laying out the facts piece by piece. The embezzlement, the stolen funds, the betrayal of trust, it all came to light. Isn't it remarkable how truth can cut through even the thickest layers of deceit? Clara wasn't just telling her story. She was giving a voice to everyone who had been wronged. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. News outlets ran headlines about the scandal, and social media exploded with outrage. Parents, former students, and community members rallied behind Clara, their support pouring in like a tidal wave. The investor, once untouchable, now faced public scrutiny and legal consequences. Clara's courage reminded people that one voice can spark a movement. Have you ever noticed how one act of bravery can inspire countless others? That's exactly what Clara's stand against corruption did. It ignited a fire that couldn't be extinguished. But for Clara, this wasn't about revenge or personal victory. It was about justice. As she watched the fallout unfold, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not because she had won, but because the school could finally begin to heal. The truth had set it free from the shadows of greed and dishonesty. And as Clara walked away from the podium that day, she knew this was just another step in her journey. The fight wasn't over yet, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like the tide was turning in her favor. In the midst of the legal storm, an unexpected ally stepped forward. Luz, the former janitor. He had seen everything during his years at the school, including the investor's shady dealings. With a quiet but resolute voice, Luz offered to testify against the investor. Clara was deeply moved by his courage. Isn't it amazing how people can surprise you when given the chance to do what's right? Luz's decision wasn't just about justice. It was about redemption. He wanted to make up for the times he had stayed silent, and this was his moment to stand tall. When Luz took the stand, his testimony was a turning point in the case. He recounted incidents of funds being misappropriated and shared details that only someone on the inside could know. His words painted a vivid picture of the corruption that had plagued the school for years. The courtroom was silent, hanging on his every word. Clara watched with pride as Luz spoke his truth, knowing that his bravery was helping to dismantle a system built on lies. Isn't it true that sometimes the most unassuming people carry the greatest strength? Luz proved that heroism isn't about status, it's about action. Luz's testimony was a nail in the coffin for the investor's case. The evidence he provided left no room for doubt, and it became clear that justice was within reach. But more than that, his actions inspired others to come forward with their own stories, creating a ripple effect of accountability. Clara couldn't help but feel grateful not just for Luz's courage, but for how far they had both come since their days at the school. Together, they were rewriting its history, one truth at a time. And as Luz stepped down from the stand, Clara knew this fight wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who believed in doing what's right. The courtroom erupted in applause when the verdict was announced. Clara had won. The investors' claims were dismissed, and their corruption was laid bare for all to see. It wasn't just a legal victory. It was a moral one. Clara had fought not just for herself, but for the integrity of the school and the students it served. Isn't it incredible how perseverance can turn even the darkest battles into moments of triumph? As she walked out of the courthouse, surrounded by supporters, Clara felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. This wasn't just her victory, it belonged to everyone who had stood by her side. News of Clara's triumph spread like wildfire. Media outlets hailed her as a symbol of resilience and justice, and her story inspired people across the nation. She became a household name, not because of her wealth or success, but because of her unwavering determination to do what was right. People saw themselves in her struggles and celebrated her victories as if they were their own. Have you ever noticed how one person's courage can light a spark in others? Clara's journey reminded everyone that no matter how hard life gets, there's always a way forward. But Clara didn't let the recognition distract her from her mission. While awards and accolades poured in, she remained focused on transforming the school into a beacon of hope and opportunity. She knew that true victory wasn't about fame, it was about impact. And as she stood on stage accepting yet another award, she used the moment to speak about the importance of education, inclusion, and resilience. Clara's story wasn't just about overcoming adversity. It was about using that adversity to create something meaningful. And in doing so, she became more than a success story. She became a movement. As Clara's story continued to inspire the nation, it caught the attention of a prominent businessman known for his philanthropic endeavors. One day, he reached out to Clara with a bold proposal to create a national educational institute modeled after her school's inclusive approach. He envisioned an institution that could replicate her success on a larger scale, offering free education and support to underprivileged students across the country. Clara was taken aback by the magnitude of the idea. Isn't it remarkable how one person's vision can grow into something far greater than they ever imagined? This was no longer just about her school, it was about changing the face of education itself. The businessman explained how the institute could serve as a network of schools, each one rooted in Clara's principles of inclusion, compassion, and opportunity. He spoke passionately about how this could be a game changer for children who had been left behind by traditional systems. Clara listened intently, her mind racing with possibilities. Could this be the next step in her journey? She had always dreamed of making an impact, but this was on a scale she had never dared to imagine. Sometimes life presents you with opportunities that feel overwhelming, but isn't that where true growth begins? Still, Clara didn't rush into a decision. She knew that taking on such a project would require immense effort and responsibility. But as she thought about the countless children who could benefit from this initiative, she felt a familiar fire ignite within her. This wasn't just an opportunity, it was a calling. The businessman's proposal wasn't about building more schools. It was about building hope, one child at a time. And as Clara considered his words, she realized that her journey was far from over. In fact, it felt like it was only just beginning. Clara spent countless nights reflecting on the businessman's proposal. It wasn't just a decision about expanding her work, it was about redefining her purpose. She revisited her old journals, filled with dreams she had scribbled down during her toughest days. One entry stood out. One day, I'll make sure no child feels invisible. That memory struck a chord deep within her. Isn't it funny how life has a way of circling back to the promises we make to ourselves? Clara realized that this institute wasn't just an opportunity. It was the next chapter in fulfilling her own vow. But stepping into this new role wasn't without its doubts. Clara worried about whether she could manage such a massive undertaking. Could she replicate the success of her school on a national scale? Yet, every time fear crept in, she reminded herself of how far she had come from being expelled and humiliated to owning the very institution that once cast her aside. Have you ever noticed how your past struggles can become your greatest source of strength? Clara knew this wasn't just about her capabilities, it was about her commitment to a cause bigger than herself. After weeks of deliberation, Clara made her decision. She called the businessman and said, "Let's do it, but on one condition. My school will be the prototype." She wanted to ensure that every new branch carried the same heart and soul as the one she had rebuilt. With that, plans for the Clara Silva Educational Institute began to take shape. This wasn't just about launching schools. It was about launching a movement. And as Clara signed off on the first set of plans, she felt a sense of excitement and purpose, unlike anything she'd ever known. The seeds she had planted long ago were now growing into something extraordinary. The launch of the Clara Silva Educational Institute was nothing short of groundbreaking. What started as one school quickly grew into a network of institutions across the country, each one built on Clara's vision of inclusion and opportunity. These schools weren't just buildings, they were sanctuaries for children who had been overlooked by traditional systems. Scholarships flowed freely, emotional support programs thrived, and students from all walks of life found a place where they could dream without limits. Isn't it incredible how one person's determination can create ripples that touch thousands? Clara's mission was no longer just a story, it was a movement. As the institute expanded, Clara traveled across the country to oversee its growth. She visited each new school personally, meeting students and listening to their stories. Many of them reminded her of herself, kids with big dreams, but limited resources. It was humbling and inspiring all at once. Have you ever looked at someone and seen a reflection of your own journey? That's what Clara saw in these children. And every time she heard their laughter echoing through the halls, she knew she was on the right path. This wasn't just about education. It was about restoring hope. Of course, the expansion wasn't without its challenges. Critics questioned whether such a large-scale initiative could sustain its quality, while skeptics doubted its long-term impact. But Clara didn't let the naysayers distract her. She had built her life on defying expectations, and this was no different. With each new school that opened its doors, she proved that compassion and resilience could create something extraordinary. And as the Institute continued to grow, so did Clara's resolve to ensure that every child in the country had access to the opportunities they deserved. This wasn't just a dream anymore, it was a revolution in education. It wasn't long before the world took notice of Clara Silva and her groundbreaking educational institute. Invitations to global conferences poured in, and international organizations began studying her model of inclusive education. Clara found herself standing on stages in front of world leaders, educators, and philanthropists, sharing her journey and the principles that had driven her success. Isn't it fascinating how a story born from struggle can inspire people across borders? Clara's work wasn't just changing lives in her country, it was sparking a global conversation about what education could and should be. The Institute began receiving prestigious awards for its contributions to education and social equity. Clara accepted each honor with humility, always redirecting the spotlight to her students and team. "This isn't about me," she would say. "It's about what happens when we believe in people who've been told they don't matter." Her words resonated far beyond the walls of her schools, touching hearts in places she had never even dreamed of reaching. Have you ever seen how authenticity has the power to connect people from all walks of life? That's what Clara's story did. It reminded the world of the transformative power of empathy and determination. But Clara didn't let the accolades distract her from her mission. As much as she appreciated the recognition, she knew there was still so much work to be done. She began collaborating with international organizations to adapt her model for other countries, tailoring it to meet their unique challenges. The Clara Silva Educational Institute became a symbol of hope, not just nationally, but globally, a beacon for what was possible when education was built on a foundation of inclusion and compassion. And as Clara stood on yet another stage, accepting yet another award, she couldn't help but think back to the young girl who had once been told she didn't belong. How far she had come and how much further she still wanted to go. Years later, Clara found herself standing in front of the school where it all began. The building had changed, modernized by the renovations her institute had implemented, but the memories lingered in every corner. She walked through the hallways, now bustling with students whose laughter echoed against the walls. It was a far cry from the silence she had felt that day when she was expelled. Isn't it incredible how life can transform the very places that once broke us? Clara smiled, not with bitterness, but with gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. She paused in the auditorium, the same one where she had been humiliated so many years ago. But this time, it wasn't shame that filled the air. It was hope. She thought about all the people who had shaped her path, the janitor who became her ally, the businessman who believed in her vision, and even those who doubted her along the way. Every moment, every challenge had contributed to her growth. Have you ever looked back on your struggles and realized they were preparing you for something greater? That's exactly what Clara felt, a profound sense of purpose tied to every hardship she had endured. As she stood on that familiar stage, Clara reflected on how far she'd come not just as an individual, but as a force for change. She wasn't just a girl who overcame adversity. She was a woman who turned her pain into power and used it to uplift others. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every step. And as Clara looked out at the students seated before her, she saw a future brighter than anything she could have imagined. Isn't that what life is about? Not just surviving, but thriving and helping others do the same. Clara's journey is a testament to the power of resilience, vision, and compassion. From the humiliation of being expelled to becoming a national symbol of hope, she proved that our circumstances don't define us, our choices do. Her story reminds us that every setback is an opportunity in disguise, every rejection a redirection toward something greater. How many of us carry dreams we've abandoned because life got too hard? Clara's life challenges us to pick them back up, to fight for what we believe in, and to create something meaningful out of our struggles. But here's the real question. What are you doing with your challenges? Are you letting them hold you back, or are you using them as stepping stones to something extraordinary? Clara didn't wait for someone to save her. She became her own hero, and in doing so, became a hero for countless others. What if you could do the same? What if the very thing you see as a roadblock is actually the foundation for your greatest success? Life isn't about avoiding difficulties, it's about rising above them and helping others rise with you. If Clara's story inspired you, don't let it end here. Take the lessons she taught us and apply them to your own life. Reflect on your goals, your struggles, and the impact you want to leave behind. And if you're ready to keep learning and growing, make sure to subscribe to this channel and activate notifications so you never miss another story like this one. Together, we can turn our challenges into triumphs and create a world where everyone has the chance to thrive.